the story that came out of Canberra today was the beginning, I guess the overview of this intergenerational report, and the headline was that over the next 40 years, we're going to see a slowing in the growth of our population. But even with that slowing, our population will be above 40 million by 2062-63, so 40 years away. That's just about in line with what Josh Frydenberg was predicting the last time he put this intergenerational report out. But I thought I'd bring it up because in the context of the present climate where we've got housing, a really hot issue, and people wondering, well, we've got more and more people coming into the country, we can't house them all, we're struggling to do all of that. Where is the politics in all of this? The coalition's making some noises about curbing population, but for some time there's been a party that's been running at elections, state, federal, the Sustainable Australia Party, which has been running on, and it's not a crackpot group. It's headed by William Burke. He's actually on the North Sydney Council now. He got a seat on the North Sydney Council on some of the platforms that they run. But they've been putting themselves up at elections saying, well, let's curb immigration, but they haven't been able to make too much ground. But I've spoken with William on a number of occasions about all of this, so I thought, well, here it is. Here's the Sustainable Australia report. The argument is, well, we're going to be older and older and older, the profile of the country. We need younger people to pay taxes and look after us all. Here's the conversation I had with William. I caught up with him earlier today. He was actually on the move through Melbourne, and as a result, I hope this phone line's okay because it's a really important conversation. Here he is.
Yeah, good evening, John.
How long have you been running the party? Because you've run it quite a few elections now, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. We've first run in 2013, so we've been going for a decade or so. It's obviously been challenging to get major media exposure. We run against the grain a little bit in terms of, pushing back against this growth agenda. But we're still out there and we're still pushing for sustainability.
Yeah, because the reason I ask you is that we get so many people talking about this, and increasingly now you get people of all generations, particularly as the housing issue crystallises this, saying, well, if someone was planning, and we go back 2017, 2018, they were planning then to bring in 2.5 million more people by the middle of this decade. So that's actually happening now, and now there's a big surge to make up for what happened during COVID, but doesn't seem to have had any planning happening then for housing. And a lot of younger people are now saying, well, could we try and turn the tap down just a little bit? But that politically, you've been singing this song since 2013 and haven't really been able to get a huge amount of support at the ballot box.
No, that's fair to say. Obviously, we haven't had that major media coverage. You get wall-to-wall Greens, Liberal, Labor, and they're on a massive unity ticket for this big Australia. Just to put it in context, last century, the 20th century, we had about 7 million migrants to Australia. That's about 70,000 per year. This century, we're on target for about 20 million plus migrants, so around 3 times more. And we've had record housing supply, John, built over the last 15 years since John Howard pushed migration up above 200,000 per year. But it's just not enough. And we know that you can only build so many houses. So the simple solution to the housing crisis is to tackle that hyper demand actually engineered by the government.
Okay, the argument is that every country is trying to increase its population. A country our size can support a lot more people, and that if we don't continue to increase our population, we're going to put ourselves at a disadvantage against all the other countries that are trying to grow their populations.
Well, that's what the economists and big business will tell you, but what the average person says is that that's not improving my quality of life. That's not improving my neighbourhood, my environment. And we're interested in the science of the environment. The state of the environment reports, John, are saying that we're running out of water, we're destroying our biodiversity, and we're undermining the life support system that is actually, keeping our quality of life. So if we destroy our environment, we actually destroy our economy in the end.
And what about the argument, and prima facie, it makes a lot of sense that as the profile of our population gets older, and there are countries that are very worried about this, China's a very good example, as the population, the profile gets older and there are fewer younger people to pay taxes and do jobs and work in some of these areas and provide care, that's going to be a real issue.
Well, that's massively overstated, John. When you actually look at Australia, if you go back 50 years, we had a workforce participation with a much younger on average age. We were about 30 on average. Now we're about 40. We had a much smaller workforce participation overall in the 50%. We're now up at 66% with a much older population. So workforce participation is not about how old you are. It's about whether you have an opportunity. And we've got record numbers of people, for example, John, 65 and above who are working. We've got record numbers of female workforce participation. But we've still got massive slack in the market where we can, according to Roy Morgan Research, we've still got 10% unemployment because they measure unemployment much differently to the ABS. So there's a lot of opportunity there to invest in Australians who are underemployed and unemployed. And we haven't really been serious about that.
Yeah, there's also this constant argument, say, people who are on the pension, whether they should be allowed to work more without affecting their pension. They've got skills, they can fill some of those gaps that are available as well. Is that one of your answers as well?
Absolutely, John. Our policy at Sustainable Australia Party is that there should be a universal age pension. Everybody should get the pension, like in New Zealand, and it's simply taxed, John. So if that's all you get, you don't get it taxed. But if you work and earn $50,000 and then another $25,000 of pension or whatever, it's simply taxed at your normal marginal rate. So everybody should get the pension, but it's simply taxable like New Zealand. That'll encourage more seniors, if they want to work 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, and that'll solve a lot of our skills and labour shortages.
There is a sense now that people are starting to point to the increase in population, particularly in relation to housing. So do you think politically, ultimately, I mean, you've got your own party, but we may start to see a shift from the major parties?
Look, it's a very difficult one, John, because the major parties get elected on, 1 or 2% variation in the vote, and people sort of put immigration and population down a little bit on their list of priorities unless you are directly impacted, like some of the migrant groups and so forth. So the major parties don't want to, turn off migrant groups, and whereas they know the rest of us, even though we don't support high immigration, most people put it down on their voting priorities below, health, jobs and those sort of things. So, whilst if we would win the vote in a plebiscite if it was a single issue, but the major parties are pretty much in lockstep to try and keep those, vested interests, including big business, on side. So it is a difficult issue to turn, but, we'll keep trying.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said plebiscite, because people often use referendum, or there isn't that much broad knowledge of the way the Constitution works, unfortunately. But referendums, of course, are about the Constitution. But plebiscites, you can have a plebiscite on anything, and there's no reason why we can't have more of these, just to get what people's views are on certain issues. You get the sense that there may be a fear in asking some of those questions.
No, exactly right. They don't really want the democratic outcome. So the same-sex marriage plebiscite, we're not changing the Constitution, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're asking an important question. And it was really great to see the majority of Australians agree on a position. That's democracy. And then we have a change in the law through that plebiscite and through that parliamentary change, I guess. We don't need to change the Constitution for many of the things that we'd like to change in our society. So more plebiscites, and we actually call for more citizen-initiated plebiscites. If you have a certain amount of people sign a petition, like Switzerland, we take that to a vote, and that takes away a lot of the vested interest and is greater participation in our democracy.
Okay, now that's a whole range of things that you've raised there, particularly citizen-initiated plebiscites, just to tap into what people think. What governments will often say is, well, you can have those, and they do it in America, in concert with your national election. They say, it becomes a diversion, as though people can't do two things at once and can't think about two things at once.
Well, I guess that's the way that the major parties want it. They want to hang on to power, and they don't want you to, change things that might, help our society and allow minor parties to get more, I guess, power and publicity. But at the end of the day, we need better civic education on how the political system works. Most people, John, don't even know how the preferencing system works. They think that if you vote for a minor party number one on your ballot, your major party number two, you've wasted your vote.
Yep.
Whereas, obviously if the minor party gets knocked out, it goes straight to your preferred major party and you can send them a message.
That's right. That's the difficulty outfits like you do have. So how have you grown? Since 2013, the issue's got more and more currency and coverage. We've actually had a couple of years where we paused immigration during COVID. I don't know whether we took any lessons on board, had a look at the consequences of all of that. But from your point of view, have you still got members? Are you still running candidates?
Yeah, look, absolutely. We're still registered at federal level, and we've just been through a test with the Australian Electoral Commission to make sure we've still got the 1,500 members required. Most minor and micro parties don't survive that. Many have been culled by that new process, gone from 500 to 1,500 members, but we've just passed it again. We're obviously running in New South Wales, Victoria. We've got an election coming up in Western Australia in 18 months. So, yeah, we're doing our best. We're much broader than just population. We're talking about things like, environment, putting our environment first, stopping overdevelopment, and basically a very much anti-corruption party. We think that planning issues have been unfairly balanced towards property developers. And we want to return planning issues to local communities, such as local councils, because that's the closest form of democracy, to the people.
Which I assume is why you got elected to a council. Have your eyes been opened at all to the way things operate, having worked at local council level now?
Yeah, very much so. Working in North Sydney Council as a councillor has very much been an eye-opener. I've seen how, councils are struggling to represent their communities against the state governments who want, this massive growth. They're often aligned with the federal government, whereas the local communities, we're having our heritage, our environment, our tree canopies destroyed by this growth. A lot of beautiful heritage properties in North Sydney, for example, are being destroyed for just, sort of Lego-style apartment blocks.
And so you get where this argument's going, because you're saying, well, we want to advocate no more growth. We don't want as many of these big apartments, and that's the homes that we're desperately needing right now. So the push the whole across the whole country is cut the red tape. Well, the red tape is what you're talking about, trying to see whether it's appropriate. So the push to cut the red tape and get the houses built, that's cutting red tape and the stuff that you've just talked about, isn't it?
Well, it is. I guess what we're saying at Sustainable Australia Party is let's tackle the root cause of the housing crisis, which is the hyper demand. It's tax concessions for property investors. It's foreign buyers. It's record high levels of immigration. Let's tackle that, and we actually resolve the issue sustainably. At the same time, we protect our local heritage, we protect our local environment, and we achieve what we call a sustainable Australia.
All right. Well, look, it's good to talk to you. We keep in touch with you, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks very much for having me, John.